Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. And we have Larry on his mountaintop with his binoculars on, observing the world. I'm going to depart a little bit. A little housekeeping note. We had trouble with email today, so hopefully everybody was emailed and notified that we're doing a show tonight, but we can't be sure. Glitches of all kinds are going on, and I believe a lot of this is actually electromagnetics. And I'm going to start, I think, in that particular area because of an article. Hi, Larry. How are you doing?
Hey, Stuart. While you're on your housekeeping notes, we can tell people that I was recently in a conversation with Barry Rothman talking about this interstellar object, and since I had that conversation and got a heads up from him, he's been under attack, and I've been under massive spam attack on my blog.
Yeah, they don't like certain things being shown, and I think that, I don't know what you want to call it. You could call it an asteroid. You could call it a comet. But I think maybe there's a messenger is much more to the point. And maybe we can get into that as to why I believe that's true. And I'm not saying it's a occupied spaceship. It could be. It's very, very similar to that which was found on the moon and the Mona Lisa that was found inside of it by NASA. All of this is secret. They have a lot of secret missions. And I want to get into some of that too, because they have a, if you can believe this stuff, and some of it is really appears to be off the wall, but I'm finding verification here and there in attempting to vet some of this stuff by people who don't even know each other, who were in the military, talking about military program, deep space programs, talking about huge triangular objects that can carry 1,000 or 2,000 people. Relates to your vision, Larry, too, where you were taken on board and people were being taken to Mars, which would fall under the alternative 3 batch consignments that were spoken of actually years ago. This is so far off the wall, nobody wants to believe it. Doesn't mean it's not true. Just because you don't want to believe it, or because you're in denial and you just cannot accept it, does not change the reality of it. Anyway, I want to read something to you because this is out of the Bible, and it shows us, I think, how little we actually know of the multiverse in which the universe sits and the deception that we are all under. This is 2 Thessalonians, and for the mystery of iniquity does already work. Only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. It's talking about being born again here, because they were not born again. They couldn't be saved. Remember, Jesus said, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, you must be born again, or you cannot enter or even see what the kingdom of God is all about." Anyway, for this cause, God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned, who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So, very deadly verse of Scripture, verified by Jesus himself. If you want to, obviously he wrote through all these people, but when he was here on earth, he had several comments to make about false Christs and that sort of thing, and not to pay any attention to it. Anyway, there is a headline here, and I want Larry to jump in here. Cosmic radiation from giant star system heading towards the Earth, and that's from NASA. What I want to get into here and bring to your mind is that Cliff High, and I'm not telling people to believe anything Cliff puts out, although it's very, very interesting. His timing is usually way off, but the events that he talks about are usually spot on. And I think a lot of people have learned that although the events will occur eventually, we just don't know exactly when. Anyway, this is what he had to say about, he called it sun disease. He also called it unknown energies from space that have a great effect to the human mind. Now, we already have proof of that because of the North Atlantic anomaly. Larry, you recall that probably better than I do. That was Stan Deyo, who did some research on what effect it had on the people there. You want to elaborate on that? Because we're coming into a time when this is going to happen all over the world.
Yeah, that was very interesting because I had received an email from someone that was living, in the Canary Islands, off of Spain region, and indicating to me that people there were having some strange ailment or disease that was happening to the people. People were dizzy, feeling faint. Some of them were unconscious. Something was affecting their body, and they were having sores. And so anyway, I contacted Stan Deyo and got him in touch with this individual. And Stan Deyo researched it and found out that the South Atlantic anomaly had drifted over that region of Africa there, that edge of Africa and Spain and the Canary Islands, and was bombarding those people with solar radiation. So that was interesting, and they worked it out. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine that was living there actually took his family and left. He said it was really, really bad. And then we had an interview with Stan, if you'll remember, Stuart, and Stan Deyo warned that because of the problems with our magnetic fields, etc., that we were going to have more of those South Atlantic anomalies open up on the planet and allow this in, and that was not going to be good. Remember that?
Yes, I do, and I was just researching part of this, and now scientists feel that this has to do with the magnetic pole shift, which I believe is going to be much more rapid, and I mean by 1,000 times more rapid than scientists are telling us, that this can happen very, very quickly. We're already showing the signs of the magnetic pole shift. The North Pole, of course, is shifting towards Siberia, and it's going at a rate of about 35 miles, I think, a year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but also the South Pole is very anomalous in the way it's moving. So what is happening is that we are entering into a period of what they call the deep minimum of the sun. And the scientists that have done work on the deep minimum have correlated that means usually giant earthquakes, a lot more volcanic activity, and weird stuff of that nature. And what happens when you have a deep minimum is that the solar winds decrease, and that allows the cosmic radiation to come in and bombard our planet. And at the same time that they think a magnetic shift can occur, and I think we can find it, not necessarily biblically, but in the unbiblical books, they talk about how the earth trembled and shook, and all kinds of things began to happen. Scientists now don't even know what's going to happen if we have a shift, but they're already writing articles about it, of which you, the general public, would never see or be told about. But they are increasingly concerned about this magnetic pole shift. If I'm reading the scriptures and the extra biblical books correctly, the ancient books, what happens is we have a magnetic pole shift first, and then we have a crustal shift. Nobody wants to talk about a crustal shift, but Isaiah 24 talks about it at length, that the crust of the earth literally shifts. And you'll find that in the book of Revelation, where it talks about how the heavens rolled up as a scroll, and the oceans come out of their beds and slosh over the land. And the reason that is true is because water, like the atmosphere, is fluid. So when the crust begins to shift to the south, winds 800, 900, 1,000 miles per hour literally reshape the entire earth. And this is what they're warning about. So I wanted to get into this a little bit with you, Larry, because I'm wondering if this cosmic radiation from giant star system heading towards Earth is a cover for what this gigantic cosmic wave from the center of the Milky Way that they've already said is on the way, and they've already seen the results. Could it be that this is a cover for that? Kind of like Planet 9 is a cover for Nibiru, or whatever you want to call it?
Well, Stuart, that certainly would fit their MO, because, when we were talking about, Planet X, or if you will, the Destroyer, or the Entourage, et cetera, they came out with this new theme of Planet 9, and they really pulled that up from an old science fiction movie in the 50s, early 50s. It was an old movie, and they actually pulled it up, and NASA began using that as an object out there that's incoming, that they're warning about, that's really, really big and going to cause disturbances, and that seemed to be a smokescreen. So I'm wondering, you may be exactly right, Stuart. This, we know that this wave is coming, and you've been warning about it, 2 years now or longer. And this may be the smokescreen that they're going to put up, like the Planet 9. This will be the cosmic ray wave, or whatever they want to call it. Stan Dale posted that today, by the way. And then I was thinking of something else. I had an earlier show today with Augusto Perez and Chuck Wilson, and Augusto said that so many things are occurring and symptoms on the planet that he's begun to read some of the descriptions from the old Cobran. Remember the Cobran Bible?
Yes,
or the book, the Cobran. He's been reading some of the descriptions of what's happening around us now that were written down in the ancient Cobran, and they're very, very, accurate, it seems. And I was going to mention, you talked about, nobody talks about a crustal shift or any kind of shift hardly, but I remember back years ago with the Art Bell show, and when you went on Art Bell, and that's exactly what y'all got into, you literally got into a physical polar shift, and what would occur. And he took you into the descriptions of that. I remember the winds and the waves and all that stuff you were talking about. And it wasn't long that Art Bell got together with Whitley Strieber and wrote the book that they made the movie Day After Tomorrow from. And I find that really just riveting. What's the odds?
Yeah. Well, I can't, how do I word this? I don't think people can wrap their mind around what this literally means and what is really coming. But remember, the Lord said that men's hearts would fail them for fear as to what is really coming upon the earth. Once this thing really begins, and it already has, we have the signs that the book of the Cobran talked about. And it also said that mankind, at this second arrival of the destroyer, would not recognize what those signs actually meant. And I think that's where we're at. So this is really serious stuff. Now, we had some Milky Way core explosions some years ago, and I actually got the pictures that they took of it, which means that there was, how do I word this? The core of the Milky Way, for you folks out there that are not familiar with it, and I know many of you are, the core of the Milky Way is, I guess they think, a black hole. That's what they call it. That's what the Mayans, Indians called it. And it occasionally, for the most part, it is what we could call quiet. Nothing is really going on in the core. And then all of a sudden, it changes, and it gobbles up all kinds of suns and vast explosions, so big, so vast, we can't even begin to comprehend it. That sends shock waves through the entire Milky Way system. And Dr. Paul LaViolette wrote about it in his book, Earth Under Fire. And the interesting part, and we've talked about this before, but I want to get into it because of Thessalonians, they have found proof of these cosmic waves coming through. And the cosmic waves cause DNA changes, and they cause mutations when they come rippling through. He is warning that a very large cosmic wave is coming, and it will be announced by a blue star that will suddenly appear in the heavens, which I often have wondered if this is not the Hopis, really, their Blue Katrina. And I did a video called Mega Earth Changes 2, Blue Star Shining, and that's why I named it what I did, because this blue star, when it appears, is the demise of humanity as we know it. It's the demise of our world civilization. It is a destruction and recleansing of the earth. So, what do you think, Larry? I think this all ties together with the arrival, the strong delusion of Thessalonians, the fallen angels, and lying signs and wonders. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. And one thing I was thinking about as you were sharing about the waves, I remember you talked about the gravity waves. And remember about a year or more ago, remember they said that, you remember the data came out that gravity waves were multidimensional?
Yes.
And that kind of, people just can't hardly wrap their mind around that. But I watched last night, we had a lot of storming up here, which we happen every day almost, but before I went to bed, this movie Interstellar came back on, and I know you've seen that.
Yes.
And I watched Interstellar again really closely and listening to their data, and do you know, in the movie, the only communication possible, the only communication in that movie possible from one star system to the solar system Earth is in, and back towards Earth, the only communication availability in that movie, and that movie's about 2 or more years old, maybe almost 3 now, was gravity. Remember, they used gravity waves to send the messages from one side of a universe to another. You remember that?
Yes.
Yep. Because they were having those gravity anomalies that were occurring because of that black hole, that had appeared. And when they used that wormhole, which it wound up being, to send a message back, nothing would go through that wormhole except gravity waves, which delivered the messages. And I was thinking that links right back in again to, what scientists have been reporting, the physicists have been reporting, that gravity waves are multidimensional. And so that tells us immediately, Stuart, that we really almost have no grasp on what gravity is and what all it affects and what may be coming through when these gravity waves begin to come through and what will happen to us and our planet?
Yeah, I think when a gravity wave hits the planet, we're in a lot of trouble through the physical aspects, but we are also through the spiritual aspects. I want to go back over to this guy over in Bosnia who issued a prophecy. And I want to get into this prophecy a little bit because it dovetails right into Thessalonians. I was listening to David Icke today, and very, very interesting, but totally new age. And this is where the big, strong delusion begins to come in. So I want to read some of what this psychic had to say. And it sounds so accurate, but if you have studied really intently, you can see where he varies from the Bible. So anyway, this phase, which the Hindus call Kali Yuga, is on the verge of ending. We will find ourselves today at the frontier between two ages, that of Kali Yuga and that of the new era that we are now entering. And then he says, everybody will soon be subjugated to divine fire that will purify and prepare them in regards to the new era. Thus, man will raise himself to a superior degree of consciousness, indispensable to his entrance to the new life. That is what one understands by ascension. Now, you may remember that Cliff High found language about what he called, it sounds an awful lot like the rapture of the church. And he called it the ascension. Now, you have to understand something here about evolution. The New Agers have bought into evolution hook, line, and sinker. They firmly believe it. The Bible does not teach evolution. If it teaches anything, it teaches devolution. Evolution is saying that mankind is rising up the ladder and is about to enter the next quantum leap of evolution into what is known as godhood status. The book of Enoch talks about the godhood status, where it says, thinking themselves gods, evil is multiplied among them. It's a deception. It's a very strong delusion. I want to get back to this guy. He's talking about, and jump in here anywhere you want, Larry, will raise himself to a superior degree of consciousness. This is the ascension, and he's claiming it's indispensable to his entrance to the new life. Now, he's talking basically, now listen carefully, before this fire will come that will transform the world by bringing it a new moral. This immense wave comes from cosmic space and will inundate the entire earth. And all those that attempt to oppose it will be carried off and transferred elsewhere. Okay, now think about this for a minute. What does the Bible teach? That Jesus Christ is coming for his church. Well, what does that mean? It means they're going to be carried off and transferred elsewhere. What this guy is talking about is those who remain on this planet will then be transformed into this higher consciousness. In other words, the next leap up the evolutionary ladder. You got to understand that the New Age consider that the knowledge of good and evil was actually a good thing. The Bible teaches you just the opposite, that it was an awful thing. And I don't want to get into why that's true, but it is true. Okay, so anyway, then I break in here, and I'm going to say this has to be the rapture of the bride of Christ and the introduction of the strong delusion, which will be accompanied by the arrival and the introduction or the apex of the strong delusion that damns all humanity because they refused Jesus Christ. They refused the fact that they were fallen creatures and the need to be redeemed. This is why Jesus is never referred to by the New Age as a redeemer, but only as an ascended master or some form of avatar. What do you think, Larry? I mean, that sounds like it's a pretty clever delusion.
Yeah, absolutely. And, what I could relate from when you began that, talking about the change from one age to another, I do believe that we're in the midst of a change at the very moment that we've left grace, basically, and we've entered into the millennium, but we're not even totally aware of that yet. It haven't clicked, even to God's people. I believe that, we're in that, what I call an overlap, where you go from one to another, and at one point in time that's hard to mark is you're on the other side already, and you haven't even realized it, but we're about to see a lot of changes. And matter of fact, what you're talking about from the biblical perspective sounds like a lot of Mark Goodwin's writings. He's done a lot of end-time books that are really incredible because they teach in those books everything that's coming, and he relates it biblically. Every chapter starts with a Bible verse, and his name's Mark Goodwin, and I've read the days of Noah, which leads off, and then it transfers into the days of Elijah, and each of those are, days of, anyway, then he's got other ones, but it's incredible writing. I mean, he's done some powerful writing. He's not really out there too much on the web. I posted his website, but it's incredible reading, and it goes into what you're talking about. And I find the twists and turns of his novels kind of link in to what you're talking about, and he calls Revelation. In other words, you're talking about the changes and the waves and, all of this stuff, and he says Revelation bears all that out.
Yeah, it does, and they're very, very clever how they weave all this stuff in for the deception or the delusion. The best and only thing that man can do, this is his prophet again, is to turn towards God. Now, that's absolutely correct. And improve himself consciously, which is somewhat correct, to elevate his vibratory level so as to find himself in harmony with the powerful waves that will soon submerge him. Well, that part is very, very iffy biblically. You are what you are. Your DNA is your DNA. You cannot change, a leopard cannot change his spots, and you can't change your nature. That's who you are. Anyway, he has some very interesting stuff. He says your present life is a slavery. It's a heavy prison. Understand your situation, first of all. You got to do that. Then liberate yourself from it. Well, Jesus called it a little bit different, but it's the same thing, really. You must exit yourself from this prison. Anyway, then he goes into something that's even better, I think, or more to what we're pointing to. The terrible predictions of the prophet Daniel, written in the Bible, relate to the age that is now opening. There will be floods, hurricanes, gigantic fires, and earthquakes that will sweep away everything. Blood will flow in abundance. There will be revolutions. Terrible explosions will resound in numerous regions of the earth. That's volcanoes going off or bombs being dropped, nuclear bombs. There where this is earth, water will come. And there where there is water, earth will come. In other words, certain continents will sink beneath the waves, and that which is underwater will rise up. God is love, yet we are dealing here with a chastisement, a reply by nature against the crimes perpetrated by man since the night of time against his earth or his mother, the earth. So a lot of this is kind of New Age mumbo-jumbo, but there's a lot of truth in here. And he talks about the sixth race emerging, and it will build itself around the idea of fraternity. There will be no more conflicts of personal interest. The single aspiration of each one will be to conform himself to the law of love. The sixth race will be that of love. A new continent will be formed for it. It will emerge from the Pacific so that the Most High can finally establish his place on the planet. Now that is totally unbiblical, because where the Lord is going to establish himself is called Jerusalem, the land of the forefathers. Anyway, then he says, and break in here anytime, Larry, the earth will soon be swept by extraordinary rapid waves of cosmic electricity. There's your cosmic waves coming through. A few decades from now, beings who are bad and lead others astray will not be able to support their intensity. In other words, they won't be able to stand against these waves. They will thus be absorbed by cosmic fire that will consume the bad that they possess. Then they will repent, because it is written, each flesh shall glorify God. So anyway, that is what he has to say about it, and we are running headlong into this concept. And when I was listening to David Icke, he's a New Ager, no question about it. He says that we are simply ascending to a higher vibration, a vibration of love, of compassion, of goodness. This is what the New Age is all about. That we then have to decide, this is the issue, that every human being has to face and has to decide. Are we a fallen creature or not? The Bible explicitly says we are fallen creatures. And because we are fallen creatures, we need a Redeemer to redeem us. In other words, he came behind enemy lines, paid the price, bought us through his blood. Now, humanity looks at that and says that's an archaic, stupid blood religion, and we will have no part of it. Instead, what they're opting for is this ascension to a higher vibration, this vibration of love, of compassion, of goodness, which everybody knows is good, but in our fallen way, we are told even by the Lord that love is the way of the future. The question is, how do we get there? Now, the New Age says we flow with the new vibrations that elevate us to a new consciousness level and accept what the Bible calls a strong delusion. And it's coupled with the arrival of the fallen ones, demonic possession, to this new higher consciousness. In other words, it's a delusion. Remember what Thessalonians said, that you wouldn't know the truth if you did not do what Jesus told you to do. So, we have the New Age versus the need for Jesus Christ as a Redeemer. So, we need a Redeemer. We need redemption because we are fallen. Our DNA is what it is, and there is nothing we can do to change it. We are what we are. Hence, we need our DNA structure to be changed by an outside force. Hence, we need to be reborn by the Creator himself. Remember what Jesus said? Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except you be born again, you cannot enter or understand or see the kingdom of God. Isn't that interesting? So we have to be reborn. Anyway, so it's got to be one way or the other. That's the point I'm getting at. And this is what humanity has to decide. And we know from the Scripture that humanity is going to decide that the New Age way to love and compassion and goodness is via this new ascension that is going to come through cosmic waves, and it will alter our consciousness. And I believe that is part of the strong delusion, that you would not even know that your conscience or your consciousness had been elevated. It'll just seem like a natural thing. Whereas the Bible tells us we are fallen creatures, we are descending into chaos. All you got to do is look around and we can see the chaos. And then we have Masonry, order out of chaos. They're the ones bringing in the chaos. They're the ones that are dividing humankind into the various factions to fight it out. Only to find out, of course, we are in a lot of trouble, and that didn't solve anything. What do you think, Larry? I mean, to me, it's simple, but it is complex at the same time.
Well, that is very true. We're finding ourselves, especially in America, totally divided, and it's reaching into other continents. You know, they're becoming divided, in all nations, actually. And what's interesting is Augusto Perez, with what you were talking about, he recently found some scientific data that says, you know, possibly that we have already had some of these waves come through, and a lot of people are having problems with their mental capabilities. A lot of people are forgetful now. They're unsure. They forget what they're doing sometimes. They stumble. And Augusto says that they've already proved, scientists have, that the frequency we operate by that controls the brain is operating on a higher level now than ever before, and he equated it, like he said, mankind operates like 3 to 5 in that range, and he said we're running about a 7 right now, and nobody knows why. So some people are having problems thinking anymore because they can't work in that frequency. What do you think, Stuart?
Yeah, I think that's true. There's no question. All you got to do is look at the rages that are occurring. People are losing it left and right, and you're right. You can attribute it to old age, but even young folks are having trouble remembering. They're having trouble learning. We're entering into this new era, and they claim that we're entering into a phase of space where the vibrational levels are in fact increasing, and this goes along with what they're finding with the cosmic waves, or cosmic radiation, I should say, where space weather has this chart. It's just a straight line up. It's increasing all over the world, and this is part, I believe, of what is coming is the strong delusion. And Jesus said that you would be protected from it if you did what he told you to do. Otherwise, you won't be. And with the arrival, which is obviously fallen angels, there's going to be a lot of deception going on. Even in visions and whatnot, I noticed deception, such as landings and, going to the place where these ships have landed because they're going to evacuate you from the earth changes that are coming. It's an absolute lie. Red Elk warned about those kind of people. Don't go outside and definitely don't go to these places where these ships have landed. It's a deception, and a bad one. And we're seeing all kinds of weird anomalies, aren't we, Larry, all over the world. I mean, the weather is just getting horrific.
It is, and that also, as you was talking about what Red Elk warned about, you remember I had that very incredible dream about those ships landing and beginning, and even our military and police having to load people up, children especially, into these craft, and nobody knew where they were going, but they were being taken, if you will. It reminded me a little bit, Stuart, of Spielberg's movie Taken years ago, if you remember that.
Yes, I do remember that, and also the movie Knowing. You may remember, what's very, very interesting is that the book of Revelation talks about you're given a white stone of acquittal from Jesus himself. what was very, very interesting in knowing was the children were all given black stones. Remember? And then they were taken by so-called angels to repopulate here and repopulate there. Now, I don't know the mind of God that well, but it would seem to me that what we're watching, the delusion in the Bible, the way it's worded, strong means totally effectual. You will not escape the delusion unless you are under the wings of Jesus Christ himself. It will be impossible to escape it. It's not based on knowledge. It's not based on what you know. It's going to be based, I believe, on what they're already talking about, and that is this rise in consciousness level. In other words, it's a fake euphoric being brought about, I think, by the arrival. And the arrival is a fake. It's satanic to its very, very core. But because mankind has refused the Bible and refused what Jesus Christ had to say and opted instead for lies and deceptions, well, then they have to suffer the result, I guess. Only way you can word it. And, you know, when we get into what's going on, let's talk about Israel. What in the world is happening over there? It seems like they're going to war very soon. What's the latest?
Yeah, like you say, Stuart, back to planet Earth and zero in on Jerusalem. It seems like they're ready for a big war over there. Matter of fact, Debkafile was reporting that Israeli and U.S. fighter jets were flying over Syria together now, which indicates to me that this coalition between Saudi Arabia, Israel and the U.S. is probably operating, and the American people don't have a clue. I mean, as smart as they think they are, they don't even have a clue. They're still busy in Washington, and they're still busy trying to, what would you say, anti-Trump every day. And what's interesting, though, is that I'd like your opinion on this. One of the people that Stan Deo really warned us about was keep an eye on this guy, this Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, in Iran, that was working out of Syria. And here's a new headline, just came out today, by the way, Yahoo News. It says, Iran's Revolutionary Guard forces are threatening to cut off the regional oil exports of the Middle East amid U.S. pressure in the region. And as a matter of fact, just before I got on, I saw a post on, I believe it was Jewish News, that was also used in I think, Drudge Report headline, said that Soleimani, and that's the man we're talking about, that general, was the most dangerous man in the Middle East at the present time, and that he had a plan to shut down all oil out of the Middle East that was going to either, the Allies or to the U.S. And this may tie back in. We're not hearing about this in the U.S., Stuart, but this may tie back into why we're having problems, and Mexico even now is threatening our oil supplies, and a lot of countries are giving us problems, and Trump is asking the Saudi king to up our allocation of oil out of the Middle East because he needs it.
Yeah, this is going to lead to war. If we tighten down the screws on Iran much further, then we're looking at Daniel 8 war, and we would also be looking, and that might start with blocking the Strait of Hormuz so that our tankers cannot go through there, which I'm sure Trump would consider an act of war. And we would go to war at that point. And if Mexico does the same thing, and if they start flooding our border, of course, we don't know what the New World Order people got in mind, but Mexico is almost as dangerous to us as North Korea. And I've been reading articles about North Korea accelerating their missile and nuclear testing. So that's all how do I say, hoopla on the mainstream press, and that they are, stopped their stuff. They haven't. They never will. That's not in Kim's viewpoint. That's off his radar screen to stop what he's doing. So, yeah, we're heading into a world of war everywhere, the Armageddon script. And I can see it happening right now because China has once again warned Taiwan. The South China Seas are being challenged by the United States and their China's new islands that they build for military purposes. We've got that. We've got trouble in just about everywhere. So all it takes is one explosion. I was listening to this kid. He's 15 years old, never read the Bible in his life, didn't know anything about it. And I'm not sure what happened, but anyway, he was taken to heaven and he was shown some things. And rabbis interviewed him. And what was interesting was he said that the war, which was coming, he said within months, huge war is the way he worded it, big war, would start on a blood red moon. We're coming up on a blood red moon over Jerusalem, 27th of July. Done a little more research on that. That is Tu B'Av. That is the Jewish love feast, but it's a feast that very few people even know about. And it's very, very interesting to me that we are having a blood red moon over Jerusalem on a date that could be the spark for war. He actually, this kid said, however, this is interesting. He said the war actually has begun already, and it started on 9/11, 2015. 9/11. And I find that fascinating. On 2015, and that Obama was the one orchestrating everything behind the scenes. He actually named, this kid actually was told, he says, by the Lord that Obama was the one orchestrating all of this from behind the scenes. Isn't that interesting?
Go along with
what do you think?
Stuart. To go along with what you just said, isn't it interesting? Stan Dale recently had a prophetic report on, listen to this. Let me read it, and then you tell me what you think here. And this actually comes from Stan Dale's website and also HolySpiritWin.net. July the 1st, 2018, says Barack Hussein Obama is the real leader of America, that Obama is working behind the scenes. Soon he will return to lead America. He is the one dividing America now. Civil war is now being planned by him. The plot is in, as Donald Trump is the controlled opposition.
Well, I've often wondered. We've always had a two-party system, or one-party system with two heads, Republican and Democrat. But it's really a one-party system, and it's just designed that way for the masses so that they're fooled. Well, we'll put the Republicans in this year, and we'll have big change. The following time, it's the Democrats. We'll have big change. All the whole while, they're heading towards a new world order and a global control system. The only difference between Trump and the globalists, and Trump is a globalist, he's already said so, but he wants sovereignty of the nations, that they can, they work together, but they're all sovereign nations. However, Daniel the prophet indicates that the United Nations will actually come to power. And the United Nations will be a global power, and it absorbs, according to the book of Daniel. I should get into that sometime for folks because it's interesting. But the United Nations actually absorbs the nations. The nations exist in name only, but they acquiesce to all the controls and edicts of the United Nations. It's the fourth beast of Daniel. Daniel says it's different than anything that went before it. Well, the United Nations is totally different. It's not a nation. It's not a state. It's really just an organization. But by treaties it makes with the nations, it literally absorbs those nations and takes over. And that's where we're headed. The gun control debate, it's all UN. It's State Department document 7277. The UN is very quietly laying down the rules for gun confiscation. And the only ones that will have guns will be, of course, the United Nations peacekeeping forces, which will be all powerful at that time. Our militaries will be basically disbanded except for internal force control. And we're watching that happen too, because the military is being used more and more, like Jade Helm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, we're heading into it. And James Comey, here's a headline: more gun control for the peasants. Well, he's part of the whole plan, just like Trump is paid opposition. Hannity, all those guys, they're paid opposition. How do I know that? Because if you mention 9/11 being an inside job, or you mention a conspiracy like Psalm 2, they will laugh you off the set. They will laugh you off the set. They will not accept it. So that tells you an awful lot about where these folks are actually coming from. We're being played, folks. They're playing you like a fiddle. This is why Jesus Christ said, you better get out of this world. I am not of this world, he said. If I were of this world, then would my army fight. But I am not of this world. That's what he told Pontius Pilate. Well, he has asked everybody that follows him to not be of this world, disengage from it. I mean, I'm disengaged from it. All I'm doing is watching a playbook, and that playbook is the Bible. It's telling you who the actors are. It's telling you what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. And the reason the Lord does this, and is the spirit of prophecy, is to get you to understand that the salvation gospel is also very real. And anyway, here's another headline, Larry. Putin summons top U.S. lawmakers to Moscow. Why would he have the power to summon our lawmakers to Moscow?
Well, there has been rumors, Stuart, and I know you've heard them over the years, that sometime back we actually surrendered. And I can't say that's true, but you've heard that too, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Dr. Peter Bader, The War of the Harvest Moon, which gets into a whole other subject I want to really cover. It's about, we have a space fleet. We have a deep space fleet. Very, very fascinating. And I've listened to 4 or 5 people who were part of that, who don't know each other, and their testimony is almost identical as to what they saw, what happened. They got TR-3Bs that'll hold 2,000 people or more. Gigantic what we would call TR-3Bs. They're off the moon. They're on Mars. They're everywhere. And people just can't believe any of this stuff. They say, well, that can't possibly be true. We'd know about it. Not necessarily, and you're right. We may have already surrendered, and all they're doing is merging us into their system, which is the beast power of the end, the United Nations, which is a communist operation from start to finish. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
what else you got?
Well, I was just going to mention that when I was in southeast Oklahoma one night, me and my wife were taking a walk, and we had a small TR-3B about 10 times the size of a car go over our heads, totally silent. And then another time when I was in Arkansas, I had a TR-3B shaped craft go over, totally silent, escorted by fighter jets, and it blocked out the stars. It was absolutely huge. And, of course, nobody believes that. But I was going to mention before we leave the show that I talked to Barry Rothman. I posted it today on my blog. He's got a new postcard up, Greetings from Gale Crater, Mars. And he indicates, look at the blue sky, look at the brown dirt, update. And so anyway, people can go to his website or go to my blog and click on it and read about the information he's got there.
Well, it's very, very fascinating because some of these guys claim there is a program, I think it's administered by the Navy or the Marine. It's the Marines, but I think the Marines are under the Navy, right? As far as I know. They're just a contingent of the Navy. But anyway, what was said was, would you like to join 20 and back here, something of that nature? And these people enroll in this, and they're gone for 20 years in deep space. Then here's that miraculous part of it. They bring them back to where they were before they left. They don't age. They're reintroduced to the Earth. Now, how are they doing that? It's called age regression, I think is one of the Marines called it. So they go off planet, and the interesting part is they were talking about wars on Mars. The Marines go out there to protect the bases that we have there. And what they're battling are reptilians and insects, large insects. Now, before you all laugh and roll over on the floor saying this couldn't possibly be true, go get the movie Starship Troopers and watch it.
Yeah.
Because a common theme of that is they're wearing Nazi uniforms or Nazi-like uniforms. The movie is basically what Mars actually looks like. And go get it and watch it. I don't think these people are lying. I'm not sure if this is brain implants for fake memories or whether it's real. But from everything that I can gather from Stan Deyo to Stephen Greer and all these other guys that are insiders that know what's going on, they're all telling us about deep space operations, TR-3Bs, anti-gravity, cosmospheres, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I am convinced it's real because the Bible more or less indicates it's real. We build our nests in the stars.
Yeah, even Stuart, if you remember, not the movie Stargate, but the series Stargate.
Yes.
If you'll remember, they actually had a U.S. space fleet in them shows.
Yes, they did. And now Trump is openly talking about it. They've had this for years, folks. They're just openly now beginning to reveal it, so that.
I'll tell you what. Yeah, I know we're about out of time. But I wanted to mention that I had a conversation with Barry Rothman the other day, and he said when he posted the Torah Code Matrix on President Trump and the space fleet announcement, that he come under heavy three-letter attack, and he's talking hundreds all over the world that were binging off of his website, researching that Torah code of the space fleet, and he said that's a dangerous thing to do. And he said also on the humorous side, he says he doesn't understand why we still want to play with these rockets when we've got so much better craft out there if we just use them.
Well, it's like Iron Mountain. There is a program for the masses of the people, which is our rockets and our whatnot that we see up on TV, and they do that. And then there is a secret military space program that NASA is operating. And these guys even talk about how they are subcontracted to NASA. And I believe it. I think there's too much stuff going on. Anyway, thanks a lot, folks, and thanks, Larry, for coming on. I guess we're out of time, and we'll see you Monday. And if anything breaks, we'll certainly come on in a flash update. So thanks again, Larry, and thank you for listening, everyone. And we'll see you Monday, the Lord willing.